We have more than 5 statutory partners on the line, in excess of 5. So if you're content, Mayor, on behalf of the co-chairs, perhaps you wish to kick off if you're there.
Yes, Rachel, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to our first virtual meeting of the Strategic Growth Partnership. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Brian Tierney and I'm the Mayor of Derry City and Strabane District Council. Normally these meetings, as you will know, are hosted by four chairs, but in order to ease the online scenario that we find ourselves in, it has been agreed by the co-chairs that I will chair the entire meeting today. So I would like to thank Pauline Campbell, Gavin Colleen and Kenny McFarland for giving me the opportunity to do this, and obviously for their work and support as co-chairs throughout their time with the Strategic Growth Partnership. Members, if I can just ask, in terms of some housekeeping, can I ask that if you're not speaking, can you please put your microphone on mute, as we sometimes get some feedback and it can be difficult for other members to hear what's going on in today's proceedings. And I would also ask that anyone who may be wishing to speak, if they can put their name into the chat box, and I will keep an eye on that and I'll call them in due course. So as I say, you're all very welcome to today's meeting, and I would just ask that members note the remote meetings protocol, which has been sent out in the PDF pack, which you will have received. Item number 2 is apologies, and I'll hand over to Colin Doherty for the list of apologies. Please, Colin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We have apologies. Clance Commerce, Mark Durkin, MLA, Jim McColgan from Rapid, Alan McEwen from Invest NI, Teresa Roy from the Western Health and Social Care Trust, Roisin O'Hagan from the Northwest Community Network, Roddy from City Centre Initiative, Janice Skellen from Department of Education, and Tricia Ward from Libraries NI.
Thank you, Colin, and those apologies will be noted. And can I also ask, is there any further apologies from the floor, or the virtual floor, sorry, that we wish to be noted today?
Mayor, if I can, it's Malachy O'Neill, Ulster University.
Yes, Malachy, go ahead.
I'll just be in the meeting until 11:30, and my colleague Myra McAuliffe will attend on our behalf today.
No worries, Malachy, thank you. So I can just ask once again, please, that people turn their mics off. I'm getting some messages through there that some people are finding it difficult to hear with the background noise and the feedback. So if we can, please keep our mics off, that would be appreciated. Item number 3 is the declaration of members' interests. So if there's any declarations, they can be made aware now, or as they come up in the meeting. Please feel free to just pop a message into the chat box again, and we'll keep an eye on this, and they will be noted. But if we have any now, we'll take them now. No? Okay, moving on. Item number 4 is the meeting minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of the 2nd, 2020. I hope you have all had an opportunity to go over the minutes, and we'll take them for accuracy first of all. Can I get a proposer and a seconder, please?
Mayor, Sandra Duffy here. I'm happy to propose.
Thank you, Sandra. Seconder, please.
Aidan Harkin, Strabane here. I'd second them.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you. And members, is there any matters arising from those minutes that you wish to raise? No? Okay, moving on. Item number 5, as you will see from the agenda, is the COVID-19 community response. And I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of Council to thank everyone who was involved in the community response effort that we have seen going on across the city and district from very early on in March. I have been involved in my own community response in the Ballyarnagh DA, but since taking up the post as Mayor, I have been out and about in many of the communities, visiting the community organisations, the community resilience teams, and seeing the work that they have been doing. and it has been absolutely phenomenal. There has been a huge effort from the community and voluntary sector across Derry and Strabane, and I think it's only right that we pay tribute to all of those people who were on the front line supporting more vulnerable residents and making sure that they had all the supplies that they needed. I know from speaking to them and watching them on social media, in the media, and being there with them, that many of them went above and beyond. And I think that is, if there's a positive at all that we can take out of COVID-19, I think we have seen our community and voluntary sector, as they often do, step up to the plate when called upon. There has been food packages and all types of support put on by government, which has been welcome across the community. But without the community and voluntary sector, in my opinion, they wouldn't have been able to happen, because it was the community and voluntary sector who were able to rally their volunteers and, as I say, step up to the plate at that particular time to ensure that no one went without and that everyone was being looked after to the best of their ability. So, as mayor and on behalf of council, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the community and voluntary sector right across Derry and Strabane for the huge effort that they put on right across to look after people and to ensure that people were safe and that they didn't go without. And on that note, members, I'll hand over to Barry O'Hagan to take us through this next few slides. So, Barry, if you're on the call.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As Brian highlighted, members, Council have worked in partnership with the community and voluntary sector and many government departments, particularly DAFC and Derry in the rural area, in terms of addressing some of the issues and fast tracking the community response. So in terms of, and I'm just going to fly through the first slide here, members, in terms of funding that we got out, there was initially 27,000 per DEA through the local growth partnerships to deliver on their COVID response plans. DFC had a community support fund of £280,000, and again, council was able to distribute that out with their local growth partnerships and within the community and voluntary sector. We were able to provide £50,000 for grants of £1,000 to £2,500, and that was through our partners and the community fund. In terms of Sport NI, there were hardship funds of up to £2,000 for sports clubs. That scheme has also been extended recently within the last month for clubs right across Northern Ireland. In terms of our three advice providers, council were able to get additional funding of £44,586 into the system for additional hours, staff, and other resources. Council also, with our community venues fund, were able to get our community centres across the district advance payments for 3 months and soon to be extended for the rest of this financial year. And also, we're able to get advance payments to our community voluntary sector project to support cash flow in those early 4 to 6 weeks of the crisis. You'll see in this slide, members, coordinated partnership approach with our various sector partners that I've mentioned. This community hub was a 7-day per week system. Local community leads were identified in each of our 8 areas, and support was provided to vulnerable and isolated people. There were community resilience plans developed by each DEA, and those are still being rolled out, the actions within those members. The coordination of food boxes, volunteers, advice, and signposting of services, funding, opportunities, etc. Food box distribution to shielded persons without access to local support and those in critical need of food or in food poverty. And I think, as the Mayor has highlighted, members, it would be remiss not to thank everyone for their effort involved in that system. We were delivering somewhere in the region of 2,500 food boxes to shielded individuals, vulnerable people, and those in food poverty right across the district, right up to the end of June. And that scheme is actually continuing to the end of July for shielded individuals. So a huge coordinated effort right across government and the community and voluntary sector, and we've got vital food out to those most in need. Just the last slide, please. not going to go into the detail of this one, members. You can just have a look at that yourselves in terms of the Access to Food project, on what was actually involved in delivering that. But again, as the Mayor said, a huge thank you to everyone that was involved and continues to be involved in delivering that scheme to the end of July. That's my slides, Mayor.
Thank you, Barry, for that. Members, the first person that I've seen looking to speak is Councillor Sandra Duffy. Sandra?
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me on. You have already stated at the start of the presentation in terms of the thanks to the community and voluntary sector for the work that they have done. It's evident from the presentation there from Barry in terms of the tremendous effort that went done from right across our communities, from the grassroots right up, and government departments in terms of Department of Communities really stepped up in terms of putting the injection of the food packages, the funding packages in, and we were then able to come together. We stepped up and we stepped in together and made sure that things happened on the ground, and we protected the most vulnerable. And I have to say, it really gave me good heart in our communities and the effort that we were involved in. And like yourself, I was involved in it locally here in the Ballyarna DA, and I can certainly say the effort and the work that went on was tremendous. So I just want to put on record my thanks and our party's thanks for that as well. And I know that the advice services were inundated with people who furloughed, were facing redundancy, were facing benefits for the first time maybe in their life. So absolutely put on thanks, my thanks to the entire community for their efforts during this COVID emergency. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Sandra. Nicola?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Nicola from DFD. So obviously I just really wanted to echo what Barry thanks to the community and voluntary sector and council obviously for the amount of work that's gone in over the last 3 months, particularly in the food box scheme, which was a huge resource required from everybody and a huge amount of effort, really above and beyond, but also on the obviously all the other things. I think what I would say is that, you know, in all areas, but particularly in Derry and Strabane, the strength of the partnerships that were there already, I think really, you know, made the actual arrangements and the standing up and all of the partnership working so much better than it would have been. So I think that's been a real positive. As you were saying earlier, there's been some positives, and again, that's definitely one. Again, I think that, you know, what we really want to do now very much is look into the future, because I suppose that although we already knew it, that the food box scheme in particular has demonstrated the amount of need and, you know, issues within the community. So I suppose, you know, as we go into the next 6 months, 9 months, that's certainly from our point of view something that we'd be very keen to see how we can work together to address some of the issues that we've, you know, been demonstrated perhaps more than ever during the last 3 months. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nicola. Next speaker is Gary Middleton, MLA. Gary?
Thanks, Mayor. First of all, can I congratulate you on your position and elevation to Mayor? I've no doubt that you will do a good job, and I just wanted to say that on the record. The next thing, I suppose, is regarding to all of this, the COVID. We've seen some fantastic working right across the community from all sectors. People have come together, and I think that much of the work that has been done over this past number of years, in terms of even this particular group, building those relationships, I think it has paid dividends in terms of trying to ensure that we manage this crisis as best as we can. I think that in all of this, we need to be mindful that we are not out of the danger zone as of yet. We need to be very careful that we do not get ourselves into a position where we become complacent. The council itself has done a fantastic amount of work in terms of showing leadership, even to other council areas, as to how the shutdown should happen, but also how we should put ourselves back into normal operation again. I would welcome a briefing, possibly from John or from yourselves, whether it be at this opportunity or at another meeting, to hear about the exact pressures that the council area is going to face going forward. Obviously we hear of potential rates increases, all of that. We need to look at that. But in the meantime, I just think it is important to put on record our thanks to everybody who's on the line today, but all of those community groups who have stepped up to the mark and ensured that our most vulnerable in society are protected.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you for your well wishes as well. They're genuinely much appreciated. So thank you. Next speaker is Paddy McEldowney. Paddy, if you're on.
Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, I worked for Easy Link Community Transport, and we were involved in coordinating and delivering the food parcels in the 3 rural DEAs with Rapid. But I also chair the Strabane Local Community Growth Partnership Board, and I would like to say that, and have it on record, that in my opinion, the community planning structures that the council were very central to establishing over the last few years, particularly in the rural areas, because we did have the neighbourhood renewal structures for a long time in the city and in Strabane town, but those community planning structures in the 3 rural DEAs were absolutely critical in any of this support getting out into the rural areas, and that being able to be done in a coordinated way and meet the needs. So can I just say that in a crisis, and this happened 3 or 4 years ago, the rural areas would have been in a very difficult position to be able to act in a coordinated way and be so effective. So for me, the absolute biggest piece of learning for the rural communities was that these structures that we put in place over the last 2 or 3 years have turned out to be absolutely critical in us responding in such a difficult time.
Thank you, Paddy. Next on the list is Martin Conley.
Thank you, Mayor. I might have missed the start of your event there, Brian, when I came in, because it was on our Zoom. But the one point that I want to make today, in respect to community response particularly, is that I think the first couple of weeks of this, because the community structures have been so strong for many years, and without being provided with lists of those who were shielding, the community structure took the bull by the horns, literally, and were able to kind of manoeuvre their way through the start of this, because for everybody, I think the first few weeks was very confusion, didn't know what to do, stuff like that. But all respect due to those people, those community leaders, both political and community, who really stepped up to the mark. The work was amazing. The one sector that I think maybe needs to be put out today as well is the youth sector. Remember, we had thousands of young people who were out of school, young people, families who were sitting at home with young people, 4 or 5 kids, maybe children with special needs, things like that there. The youth sector, and I can only speak for the Ballyrna area, which yourself, Brian, and Sandra, and people like that are part of, those youth providers in that area were phenomenal. The services that they provided those young people, either through daily chats on Zoom, providing packs, activity packs, I think that in itself needs recognition, because without that there, I think it would have been very, very traumatic. And we know coming out of, well, we're not out of this, but coming out of it in a way, at the minute, a lot of those young people are going through mixed emotions. A lot of young people who are now have the thoughts of moving on to college, secondary school, grammar school come September. There's going to be a lot of issues there, but I know at the minute the youth sector in particular have done fantastic work, and I just want to put it on there that we give them that credit for doing that sort of work. With. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and I'm sure everyone will agree with you in terms of the effort put on by the youth workers of the area. Though when they weren't working with youth, they were out supporting the more vulnerable residents. And when I spoke at the start, Martin, I thanked all of the community and voluntary sector which obviously included the youth workers right across the area in Strabane as well. But I fully take your point on board. Next speaker is Councillor Paul Gallagher. Paul.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting us in. I know when we tend to do evaluations and look back, we do tend to look at it, and we just look at the positive, and there was a lot of positives. The community sector came out in strength and deliver a lot of stuff. But I think we should also look at, some of the weaknesses that was about and see if we can put plans in place that if there is a second wave, that they don't happen. And a lot of that stuff was around getting access to PPE gear. One, see, for me, for this thing brought out for me was I tended to notice there was, in particular in Strabane, there's a massive amount of people who work in the community care sector, and they're very, very vulnerable. For the first 4 weeks, they were anxiety levels was through the roof. They hadn't access to PPE gear, and they believed like they were going in very much risking their lives for the work they were doing. And there was a lot of them that had to leave their family home because there was vulnerable people at home. So there's stuff around the potential of identifying properties that people could shield in if they had to leave their family home for the work the frontline work they were doing, and that was across the board with ambulance drivers and nurses and doctors as well. So I think while we're on here and we're talking about a lot of stuff, that the big stuff was around the supply of food, but there was other massive amount of stuff that was going on that supported the lockdown for people to be able to lock down, and that was people who could afford it, got groceries and delivered to their house and prescriptions and that type of stuff that allowed them to support and stay at home. So I know we're focused a lot on the likes of the food boxes and that, but there was much more done, and there is a lot of gaps that we're evaluating, that we should look and identify and how we can remedy in the future. But again, well done to the community sector. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Paul. And I'm sure, whilst we all recognise the huge effort that was put on, it was put on in a very rapid speed. I'm sure that if we are looking at a second wave, as you pointed out, if there are lessons to be learnt right across the piece, I'm sure that people will endeavour to do that. Members, there's still some mics on there, so if people wouldn't mind just switching them on to mute, because we are getting a fair wee bit of feedback there. Thank you. Next to speak is Chief Executive John Kelpie. John.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I suppose I'm just going to come in response to a number of the questions or the comments made there. Paul, Martin, and Paddy, in particular. Firstly, I think Paul's right. Lots of good things happened, and in every situation we should evaluate it, and we should say, well, if we were in this situation again, what would we collectively do better? I think there's definitely merit in the planning partnership having a look at that in the coming months prior to getting into the autumn phase, to see what we have done well and to examine where we could improve. If we were, and hopefully we won't, but if we are hit with a second wave, not just in respect of this issue, but in terms of our community response generally, this is probably the first time ever we've had to put in place a community response right across the entire district at the same time. Normally there's been a community response to a particular incident that is local or geographically based within the council area, but I don't think I've ever seen a scenario where we have the entire area operating at this level. So I think that would be really beneficial, and if members are content, we'll have a look at maybe organising something in and around that to capture some of the lessons learned. Going back onto the positive side of things, I mean, just reinforcing your words, Mayor, from a council perspective, we are absolutely indebted to our community and voluntary sector partners throughout the last 12, 14 weeks. Indeed, all of our other statutory partners as well, who have been incredibly supportive during this period. As Martin has said, we've always had a very strong community infrastructure in the council area. But as Paddy McEldowney said, if we hadn't developed the local community planning structures along the lines that we have done, we would now be looking to do it, because it's certainly a model that, having had it in place, has enabled us to move so swiftly, albeit there are definitely things that we need to do differently. To have had these structures in this model in place, and the level of trust and cooperation that has been built up over the last number of years, has enabled us to move very, very quickly and to get resources out the front line, and almost to be cooperating to a certain degree instinctively as well, in terms of what the right things are to do. So thank you very much for all of that. MLA Gary Middleton asked a specific question about the challenges the council is currently facing. And I suspect, Mayor, you don't have 2 or 3 hours for me to answer that question. But what I would say is, probably generically, we are facing similar challenges to many of all of the organisations that are represented in this call today. We're not distinct from any of you. You're all facing the same things, but we did reflect on this last week, and it is quite incredible what we're all currently trying to do right now. All of the statutory agencies, all the community bodies, all of the government departments, businesses. We're trying, I suppose, to all manage services, to all manage our businesses in respect of these very different changing and rapidly developing circumstances. At the same time, we're all planning and implementing operational recovery, and that again changes every day. We're all in our own ways trying to provide strategic leadership, trying to look beyond all of this to what the wider, bigger picture is. Has it changed? Is it still the same objectives that we're trying to collectively achieve to try and look beyond the here and now? There's a huge, as we know, expectation that this is all over and we're back to business as usual and normal operations, and every one of us is experiencing that pressure while trying to respond and knowing that we're not in business as usual. There's a parallel stream of thought that we should now be taking this opportunity to do things completely differently, to come up with new thinking and new approaches. All of our organisations, and council is no exception to this, are experiencing huge financial pressures, current financial pressures, but also looking to the months and years ahead and where that might lead us. While at the same time trying to manage a degree of risk and health and safety considerations that are well beyond those that we've ever experienced before. And then finally, we're doing all of this with our most important assets, whether it's the community sector, whether it's government department, whether it's council, whether it's a business. Our most important assets are our staff. And it's all about the health and safety of our staff. Many of them are working, as we are today, from dispersed locations, working remotely. A substantial proportion of our staff and council are still currently furloughed. And then those that aren't, in line with many of yourselves, have been working excessively long days and excessively long weeks. So there's a whole resilience piece there as well. So I would certainly say, Gary, a very short answer to your question. Council is experiencing pressures over the last number of months and in the months ahead like it has never experienced before, managing multiple strands of all of this. But that's in common with every one of our businesses and every one of our statutory and community partners, and they really are extraordinary times. But I'm sure to date, as we all have got to this point, we will get through it in the months ahead, and we will particularly do so if we continue to work in this collaborative and supportive way, while still continuing to challenge each other where that's justified and constructive. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, John, for that. Members, the next indicated speaker is Councillor John Boyle. John. Are you there? Yeah.
Yeah. Apologies for the delay in coming in there. VAT problem, my end, Mayor. But again, thank you for bearing with it. I'm not gonna go over the ground already covered again. Just to I suppose reiterate all of those expressions of gratitude, thanks, and indeed praise for so many people across the community who worked with great dedication and diligence over what actually was a very protracted period of time. And as Councillor Gallagher points out, there clearly always will be lessons to be learned, and I appreciate John's response to some of those particular queries. And I think we all understand and appreciate that we're far from out of the woods at this point, but at the same time we should also reflect on the fact that in our city and district council area, relatively speaking, and by comparison to other parts of these islands and indeed globally, we get off lightly, if I can use that phrase, and that's down to so many people making the right choices and the right decisions, and most of all, actually, it's down to the community as a whole. And as actually indicative, and I'm sure we'll all agree with this, it's indicative of the community spirit that we witness every day of the week, 365 days a year across city and district. And again, it's important that we, as a city and district council, and all of the various partners who are online here today, continue with the messaging and continue to be consistent with the messaging. Going forward, we do need to keep saying the same things to people in relation to social distancing, in relation to hand washing, in relation to the fact that unless journeys really are very necessary, then they should consider all ways and means of protecting themselves and their families, and indeed, of course, very importantly, those who work in frontline services. But it's been a huge effort by so many people. If we were to sit here and list them, we'd be sitting here until the middle of the afternoon. But again, all of that work and the leadership shown, particularly by council officers, has been exemplary, and I look forward to further reports coming forward as we do review the situation. Hopefully this will be over in good time. That's obviously an ambition for all of us, but we don't know what the future holds. And clearly, from the council's perspective, and it's been well rehearsed, there are many financial challenges facing us all, and the City and District Council in particular has challenges to face with very difficult decisions potentially in the future. And again, we'll need the support of others here present to continue to deliver services and protect communities. So again, Mayor, I don't want to overegg it, and to thank everybody involved.
Thank you, John. Linda Watson. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me come in. Just from the community and voluntary sector, I just want to say I'm really proud to be part of the community and voluntary sector in this city at this time. We really stepped up to the mark, and I want to thank all the statutory partners who helped us. Obviously DFC for coming up so quickly with the food boxes. If there's one negative, it probably was the referral system, and I think many would agree with me on that. And if we're going to be looking forward, and hopefully there won't be a second wave, but if there is, we really do need to look at a proper referral system. I think it was left very much in the end to the community and voluntary sector and our knowledge of our areas. We did a few years back with Martin Daly, most of the communities did community response plans. Obviously at that time COVID wasn't even thought of, so maybe it's time for us to revisit those. building on the response plans that are there, but adding in the whole COVID experience into that. And there are a lot of lessons, but the feedback on the whole from the community has been excellent, and the whole community spirit. And obviously, I can only speak from working in the water side. I never seen community groups coming together as well as we did through this whole crisis. And I just want to say a big thank you to everybody. And as I say, I do think we need to learn from the lessons that we've learned. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Linda. Linda, that's certainly one of the things that was coming up when I was out and about speaking to community organisations, that the referral system could have been better. So I would agree with you in terms of the lessons learned. If there is, and hopefully there isn't, a second wave, but maybe that's something that we could be looking at to try and change or even make better anyway, for a start. But members, thank you all very much for your comments, and I'm sure those on this call from a community and voluntary sector background will take those comments away and feed them back to the organisations within their DEAs and to their volunteers, so that they know how valued they are within this group, and certainly within Derry City and Strabane District Council. And thanks to Barry for taking us through that presentation also. Members, item number 6. Yeah.
Mayor, Aidan Harkins, Strabane here. Just I had my hand up there. I'm not sure if you've seen it there.
No, Aidan, it didn't. Just in future, if you can just put it under the chat box, I'm sort of trying to keep a wee eye on that. But go ahead, Aidan. Okay.
Right. Just on behalf of, as chair of the Strabane Town Renewal Strategy Partnership, I want to say a massive word of thanks to everybody, especially the local community and voluntary sector, who totally changed the course of their work to deal with this crisis. It would be wrong of me not to also mention yourself coming under the new role as mayor, and your previous mayor, Michaela Boyle, the massive work that you both have done and showing great leadership through this. Again, the politicians, councillors, MLAs, and even our local MP, who all stepped up to mark. This crisis just crossed all boundaries, and everybody rallied together. The amount of work that I've seen going on in Strabane Town has been totally unreal. I want to pay tribute to the council staff that we've been working with through Neighbourhood Renewal Strategy Partnership, Jared McFadden, Sean McMonigal and Carol Stewart in particular here in Strabane Town. I would be remiss too not to mention Council, DFC, National Lottery, Community Foundation, Housing Executive and many other funding bodies who all stepped up to the mark, and the turnaround and some of the applications for funding was like less than a week, which was greatly received within the community. Like here in Fountain Street, where I work out of, a Strabane area scrubs team came together, making scrubs for hospitals, for care homes, for schools, for community and voluntary sector. And, that to me showed the worth of what we were doing. I'm sure there's lessons to be learned, as there is in any process, but the lesson that I've seen in all of this is how the community can stand together and how we can deliver. So again, thanks to everybody that have been involved, and would be remiss not to mention the young people who, there were a few incidents that didn't go on too well right across the Strabane and Derry districts, but by and large 95% of our young people were a credit and they're to be applauded for that.
Thank you for that, Aidan. I suppose it was remiss of me not to, I suppose, pay tribute to our former Mayor, Michaela Boyle, for the role that she played. Michaela knows privately and publicly what I think of the role that she did play. She led the city and district with great ability during one of the most difficult times that many of us will have faced in our lifetime, and I think it's a credit to her the way that she went about her role, and I would just like to have that noted as well. But thank you, Aidan, for that. Members, moving on, item number 6 is equally important now on the way out of this current wave of COVID-19, the city and town centre recovery, and I'm going to ask Karen Phillips to take us through those slides. Karen, if you're there, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, members, just to update you in terms of the work that has been undertaken to date, as we moved into recovery, Council set up a city centre, town centre recovery group, basically pulling together the key stakeholders to look at how we may make changes to the physical environment in Derry city centre and Strabane in particular, pulling together stakeholders such as DFI, DFC, many officers from across various parts of council, CCI, the Strabane bids, business representatives, etc. And really what we wanted to do was consider potential opportunities for improvements within the physical environment in both Derry City Centre and Strabane. So basically, following on from the initial stakeholder group, which was chaired by our Chief Executive, we then made efforts to undertake physical walkthroughs in both Derry and Strabane, basically pulling together those stakeholders and actually doing street by street audits to look at potential opportunities. And really that was to identify a range of physical initiatives that would help us to mitigate risk, ensure potentially social distancing, support traders in terms of being able to trade agilely, and to improve the physical environment so that it would become as inviting and as comfortable for people to move into as we could do that. So members, we undertook these visits and a number of initiatives were brought forward and they have now been assessed by the stakeholders, considering how we actually might move forward in terms of speed and how we might move forward and in terms of the possible initiatives. So really, we also undertook a survey of existing businesses across the district to basically ask how we could help them and what measures they wanted to actually see. So that really was added to the physical audit in order to inform that process. And as I said, we had officers across council involved in this from many different sections of council. So if we could maybe move on to the next slide. So in terms of partnership, clearly we've seen that it was very, very important to ensure that this work was undertaken in a partnership way. DFC had advised of potential DFC funding in terms of supporting physical regeneration and physical recovery within the city centre and the town centre. And we pulled together very quickly a business case in terms of possible initiatives, which was then submitted to DFC and is currently being considered by them. And areas that could be funded, we were advised, was things like shop local campaigns. We put forward the potential for additional cleaning, considering that we would be potentially having more trading on the streets. Street furniture, infrastructure, planting, also the potential for a business grant aid scheme where we could actually administer a scheme to enable businesses to apply for funding to have measures such as street furniture, heaters, canopies, even the likes of sanitizer, etc. And also an animation programme to see how we could encourage people to come back into the city and town centres. So members, as you will probably be aware as well from the press, the DFI Minister had launched her initiative around increasing walking and cycling, and we did feel that it was very important to actually ensure that that was mirrored in with the rest of the work that we were doing so that we could actually incorporate that and the needs of walkers and cyclists in any schemes that we were designing and considering. And indeed, DAERA have provided some additional funding for an extension to the Rural Business Grant Scheme. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So basically at our full council meeting last week, the members of Derry City and Strabane District Council considered all of these issues, and really they approved some changes to the pavement cafe licenses to introduce temporary arrangements. And we have now seen some applications starting to come in on that. Members also agreed for the Wall City Market to restart on the 18th of July, and car parking charges started again yesterday, with initially basically giving advice to drivers to advise them that they needed to continue to start to pay. We also got permission from members to accept a letter of offer from DFC should one come in the next couple of weeks. And members, just for your information, I think the feedback from our elected members was really that we should be using this opportunity to trial new ways of operating our city and our town centre, to explore new approaches, to be bold, flexible and adaptable, and to use this as a potential opportunity for considering how we might actually operate our city and town centre moving forward following the City Deal Regeneration project. So I'm happy to take any members' comments and feedback. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen, for that. Members, before we do take any questions, and I've got a few people on the list here, I'm just going to ask our Chief Executive, John Kelpie, to just a follow-up on that. John?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Karen. And I suppose briefly just to say, Mayor, just in respect of the huge amount of cross-working there was with the community and voluntary sector, with regard to the operational recovery in the city and town centres, I'd like to thank, as Karen has outlined there, the huge amount of collaboration that is now taking place across the business community and across the statutory bodies and the government departments to try to pull all of this together, particularly referencing DFC and DFI, who have been very active both in terms of time and financial support. So while all of this is planned, I mean, we sit here today where we've done a number of deep cleans of both Derry City Centre and Strabane Town Centre to ensure that the place is as clean and as safe and as presentable as possible for the reopening of businesses last week and hospitality sector this week. We've rolled out all the banners and all of the city and town dressing as normal, and we have just completed this week all of the baskets and hanging baskets and flowers to try and make sure that it looks as well as possible. The pavement licensing thing has been quite difficult and quite tricky. I mean, obviously it's subject to legislation. We've worked with our legal teams and with the other councils to put in place a very flexible arrangement that still keeps us on the right side of the law, but enables businesses to move quickly and swiftly to trade outdoors as soon as possible in order for them to comply with social distancing regulations. So there's lots going on in this space at the minute, and we're very open to further suggestions. But again, our key focus over the next number of months is to make sure that Derry City Centre and Strabane Town Centre has the best chance of the quickest and speediest recovery and supporting our businesses in the best way we possibly can.
Thank you, John. Members are going to have some questions now. First on the list is Pauline Campbell from DFC. Pauline?
Thank you, Mayor. So just to come in, just from a DFC perspective, thank you, Karen, for that update just around the town and city centre recovery. And also just to say, on behalf of DFC, thank you for the positive comments that have been made so far. It's nice to get positive feedback. I'll certainly be relaying that to the business areas responsible, food box scheme, etc. But just in terms of the Town and City Centre Recovery Fund, just to give an update, our department is currently, we've allocated capital to be used across all 11 councils. There is a business case which has been drafted. It's gone up the line now through the approvals process. We're hoping that it will be dealt with at pace. As you'll appreciate, a lot of things have over the past number of months, and we would hope that that this would be would follow the same principle as well. So we would hope that our minister will be able to make an announcement around capital funding for the Derry and Strabane area very, very shortly. And we'll continue to work with our council colleagues, John, others, just in terms of the priorities for the area, making sure that we deliver a programme of interventions that are meaningful, that help our towns and city centres towards that recovery phase. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Pauline, for that. Sinead McLaughlin. Sinead, are you on the line there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Sinead, go ahead.
No, just can I add my thanks as well to Pauline and Karen. Thank you for the briefing as well. I suppose we're entering, as we're coming out of lockdown, we're now entering, this is a more difficult phase really, trying to get things opened safely and well. But it's also, you know, we've got to take it as an opportunity. You know, how do we transform the way we live, and how do we transform how we use our city centre as well? And we've been talking about it in this forum and other forums for a very long time, about how we effectively use our city centre. And I'm just hoping that this is the time that we actually move at pace, as Pauline has suggested. Minister Mallon tends to do things very quickly, and we're hoping that we get this recovery fund, the money in place so that we can, you know, we want to transform how we live, but we also want to, you know, preserve and enhance what we treasure within our city centres as well. But I do think this is the time that we need to shift to be a more active and green recovery, and we have to take that into the discussions as well. But I think we do need to plan a lot of media, or a lot of marketing around shopping local and shopping local, sorry about that, and shopping local. So I think we have to do that. We need to inspire people to be confident to get back into the city centre. And I have been around the city centre in the last few days, and it is looking well, but it is very, very quiet. And we have to try and encourage people to get back in and have that bit of confidence. And if our businesses, and I know that our local businesses and our independents are doing the best that they can to open safely, and we hope that when the pubs open tomorrow that they're done safely and respecting you know, the health risk that is still out there, and we need to be cognizant of that as well. So no, but I want to just thank everybody. I'm coming in now, and I'm going back to the last one, but the community response has been amazing, and Derry needs to congratulate itself. But we're not out of the woods yet, and we need to just be careful moving and unfurling out of the lockdown. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sinead. Next speaker is Adele Waters from DFI. Adele?
Yes, I think there are a number of themes that have been maybe already sort of picked up by others. But I think one of the things is about there's an opportunity now to do things differently in terms of, you know, how we make our places and about walking and cycling sort of initiatives. But there's also that sense of that there's the inability to go back to things as they were, you know, as we relax, you know, sort of various of the restrictions, you know, really our transport systems are sort of are you know, pressed to capacity in terms of, you know, important that we are taking this opportunity of and cycling initiatives. And I think one of the things that as sort of we would be keen to stress is, you know, the that can make to improving physical and mental health, you know, along with, you know, sort of aiding, you know, hospitality businesses and helping to bring back people into the city centre. Another thing as well is, and I what John was saying about, you know, that some of these things are really quite difficult, you know, particularly around the pavement cafe sort of licensing. But that's not a reason for us not to try new things, to try different things. And as we're doing it, to do them in a way where we are, not all of the things that we will do will work or will work in the way in which we actually initially think, but basically we should do them, monitor them, evaluate them, and, you know, do them better. So I think that's just sort of putting forward a few points on that.
Thank you for that, Adele. John Boyle, Councillor John Boyle. Go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I found myself wondering aloud about a number of things in relation to the recovery plan, and obviously I am quite cognizant of the plan going forward, because you and I and other councillors on this call were party to the decisions and arrangements from council meetings last week. However, one of the areas that I'm less sure about, Mayor, and perhaps others might have a view on this, is the level of messaging and advice that's being provided to businesses that are now reopening, and I am specifically thinking of those in the services sector, like hotels, restaurants, and bars, where people will inevitably come into closer contact than they have done in the previous number of months. And not only that, but the fact that people actually will be sharing not only spaces, but implements and dishes and glasses and cups, and they'd be using the same surfaces. What level of advice from the Department of Health, for example, is being provided for businesses in relation to that? Because clearly that is probably one of the most challenging areas that those sorts of businesses will face. And I'm conscious of the fact that, you know, in other parts of the world, the businesses did open very, very recently, and actually in some states in the United States, no sooner did they open than almost a week to a week and a half later, they were closing them again. Thinking very specifically of Florida, Texas, and very lately California, and it was limited opening, and I have that in extremely good authority of family members in California, and you know, some of it I think is being traced to the fact that some of the health advice either had not been appropriately given or was being ignored. Does anybody have a view on that, or what kind of advice are people being given right now?
John, I'm not sure who you're answering that question to.
I think.
If I could, sorry, maybe this.
John, yeah, go ahead.
No, just from a council perspective, there's probably advice from all sorts of quarters at the moment, and there's certainly reams of advice coming from the Northern Ireland Executive and the Department of Health in particular. What I would say is that our environmental health team and our business team have engaged with literally hundreds of businesses over the last couple of weeks on an individual one-to-one basis to disseminate whatever advice that we've been able to pull together and coordinate. So if there are on the call any businesses, or if people are aware of businesses who need some additional advice, please call our environmental health team or our business team, who will do our best to either signpost them or give them direct advice from a health perspective, or indeed from a business support perspective. But I'm aware also that there are other agencies and other government departments who are doing the same.
Thank you for that, John. Karen, did you want to come on there as well? You weren't calling? No.
Sorry, I was just going to say what John had said then.
No worries, Karen. Thank you. Gary Middleton, the MLA, is looking to ask a question. Gary.
Thanks, Mayor. I just noticed there that Martin Graham from Tourism NI has indicated he wanted to come in on John's question. Do you want to take that first, maybe? It's up to yourself.
Yeah, Gary, go ahead. Yeah, if you don't mind. Martin, are you there?
Yes, Chair, and Gary, thanks for that. Yeah, I just wanted to come in there, just John's queries around the service sector, particularly hotels, restaurants, bars, which we would have an input in. Just last week, we actually launched a set of reopening guidelines for the industry to try and help them through this process, which is obviously very new to everyone. But really, as people have said earlier, keep the staff safe, keep customers safe, and keep everyone interacting in those grounds safe as possible. But also just making sure that don't have hotels that are more like hospitals, that there is that hotel leisure, the hospitality factor has to be in there. Otherwise, there's little point in putting visitors or locals coming into those spaces. But that's the kind of the key drive. We've worked with the Hotels Federation, working with our UK Tourist Board colleagues across the water in the UK, Republic of Ireland, to make sure that we have a common set of guidelines. So they're out there, a very significant set of guidelines, do run to 30 odd pages, and they do go through sector by sector, hotels, attractions, event organisers, and so on. There's also a new We're Good to Go charter mark that's been launched, or industry standard that's been launched, again, a UK wide standard. And that gives that sort of charter market application process that allows businesses to actually apply into an online system. It's UK call centre supported and contact supported, and really just allows you to put things like stickers and details in your websites and emails to say that we are good to go, that we are safe, we're meeting all of the compliance and guidelines to make it safe for you and our staff, for visitors and customers to interact as much as possible. Last week and also next week, we're running webinars to support all of those individual sectors. So that's all of it's on our new COVID-19 Tourism and microsite, which I'll circulate to everyone, all members after this chat as well. I hope that's of some use to everybody.
Thank you for that, Martin. I'm sure it will be of great use to everyone. Gary, do you want to go ahead there now? Gary Middleton?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I suppose my query, first of all, I do welcome the opportunity to look at the city centre, how we do things differently. For a long time, this has been talked about, and I think there's an opportunity now to look at how we can actually deliver on that. One thing which I did want to raise, and I appreciate what John has said around engagement with businesses, and it is important that that messaging is clear, that it's delivered regularly to those businesses. But I have had some queries since the announcement around the pavement cafe and the waiving of fees and all of that. Some disability groups, some parents have been raising this issue as well around their access in and around the city centre should pavement cafes open. Now, I appreciate the businesses will do what they can to make sure that there's no serious issues, but I think that it needs to be clearly articulated to those groups that their rights will also be respected if pavements are going to be used. That the messaging will be clear to them. So I just want to get clarification around when these decisions have been taken. Are groups consulted? I appreciate everybody individually can't be consulted, but there are some large disability groups out there and parents forums as well. Who will be able to relay the message on behalf of those who are making these decisions.
Thank you for that, Gary. Karen or John, would you like to come on that, or?
Happy to do so, Mayor. Yes, no, that was a big issue that was raised, Gary, at the full council meeting last Thursday, and there's an absolute commitment that the RNIB and other major disability groups will, of course, be consulted in relation to any licence. We haven't changed the consultative process. There will be a full consultation on any pavement cafes. We simply made some tweaks to make it happen quicker, and to ensure that all views are taken into consideration, and that we've tried to reduce the bureaucracy around that, but absolutely. And then in relation to the DFI initiatives that were just spoken about as well, I mean, this is the opportunity for us to look, and we're working with DFI now to do new, bold, imaginative, temporary things in the city centre and town centre that that a year ago we wouldn't even have dreamt of. Closing down roads for weekends, taking away lanes of traffic for additional cyclists, and that's what we're working through with DFI now. So where there are cafes and businesses who couldn't trade outdoors because the pavements are too narrow, and there would be disability issues, we can now look imaginatively and join this all up together to look at the temporary closure of a road for a long weekend, for example, to allow that road space to be used for tables, to ensure that everybody's needs are satisfied. And in turn, as one of our other MLAs has said, maybe completely help reshape the future of our town and city centre.
Thank you, John, for that. Members, there's no other further comments on that, so we're going to move on to item number 7, is the economic impact of COVID-19 and the next steps. And I'm going to hand over to Dr. Owen McGuinness to take us through the next number of slides.
Thank you, Mayor, and appreciate the invitation to speak today. It's a very different position to the last time when I came and addressed the growth partnership towards the end of last year, and we were kind of looking at that stage of how, you know, what the strategic growth plan was doing to drive the local economy and how successfully the local economy was operating at that point. Since the kind of COVID crisis began, the centre has done a few papers, and this is the outworkings of one of those. We're looking at the kind of local government impacts in terms of kind of GVA impacts and employment ones. And I'll just ask, you know, in terms of this next slide to be moved on, please. So, and through to the next one. So I suppose when we're thinking of COVID, you're looking at 3 different ways in which the crisis has kind of worked its way into the economy. One, which we've heard quite a bit about this morning, is in terms of the restrictions around public spaces. The second one is the kind of stay, either to remove yourself from work or for businesses, non-essential business, to be closed with furlough schemes and self-employment schemes being put in place. And then the third one, which is probably the key one for thinking about a recovery, is what all of that will do to consumer confidence and indeed business investment confidence. Next slide, please. And I think as we've kind of gone through the crisis, we've seen the forecasts for quite shocking real drop in growth expected in 2020. And albeit with a kind of recovery expected to begin towards the end of this year and into next year, it could be 2 to 3 years before most national economies reach their previous peak at the end of last year. Next slide, please. You can kind of see it locally here as well, with a kind of collapse in business activity in April, marked by that kind of drop as we were in the full effects of the shutdown. There's been a little bit of a comeback really in May as the restrictions begin to ease, but it's only a small one. We're still very much in negative territory, and we'll see the June figures for that soon enough, I think. Next slide, please. So as we're sort of seeing that the economy shut down effectively, about 80% of the economy shut down, there's a lot of sectors that we believe are going to be most impacted. You can see them there: wholesale, retail, hospitality being key ones, maybe slower to come out of the or will be slower to come out of the crisis. Manufacturing, construction, right across the board, but around about 415, 420,000 jobs across those sectors that could be impacted. And it was on that basis then we started to think about what jobs had been or were being impacted either by layoffs or furlough. So next slide, please. And when you start to look at the kind of early signs on unemployment, which is probably one of the first signs, is like the canary in the coal mine. Derry City and Strabane began the crisis with around 6%, just shy of 6% unemployment in March, and then that's kind of increased by a further 60% in April to May. So significant rises. You can see that right across the council areas. And I suppose one key thing we would say about this is that whilst you have a kind of a short-term unemployed or recently unemployed block, there will also be the long-term unemployed or people who were unemployed before the crisis began that will have to be kind of helped and supported along the way too. So next slide, please. And in the next slide, you'll see the furlough scheme. Around about sort of 14,000 in Derry City and Strabane, we reckon, from the kind of official figures by the time the furlough scheme, comes to its peak. And interestingly enough, figures are still being added in every week as goes past that scheme. Companies are still adding people to the furlough scheme as we speak at the moment. What we kind of saw there was that Derry City and Strabane might have had fewer people added to that scheme, but still a significant number there. And the key question really on the furlough scheme is what happens when that comes to an end or begins to taper out. And there's some estimates that as many as 25% of people may not return to work after the furlough scheme comes to an end. If that was the case, you could be looking at an additional 4,000 people entering unemployment or economic inactivity in the council area. So significantly big numbers here. Next slide. So looking down to the council area, we've done this in two ways, really. The GVA impact, and you can see that towards the bottom of the slide there, between 9.5% and 10% GVA expected to be to fall in this year. That's an enormous effect. If you look at the next slide as we go into that, you can compare it to previous crises, and you can just see from that slide what that looks like, even in comparison to the last recession. Very sectorally concentrated. We know that decline will be, but we're expecting it to be felt across every firm and every household and within the council area. Next slide. Moving on then to employment impacts. Really, what we're sort of thinking there could be around about 16,000 people either laid off or furloughed as at the peak of the crisis, which we kind of expect the labour market impacts to kind of peak perhaps around October, November time as the furlough scheme tapers out, comes to an end, and this business would make decisions as to whether to bring staff back or not. So that's the kind of what we're thinking, and you can sort of see there that it'd be around about a quarter of those who are in employment at the end of last year would certainly be at risk of an impact by either furlough or by being laid off. That's an enormous figure when you look across the council areas there, between a quarter and a third of staff at risk there. And that leads me on to the next slide. And that's really just some concluding thoughts in terms of what the future might hold. But this is probably the most important bit of a way. We are in a situation where we are now where the impacts have been enormous due to the kind of public health measures that had to be taken. But now we're seeing the reopening of the economy, and people have spoken about that earlier in the earlier discussions around the recovery plan, and indeed even around the community response too. We've begun to see the reopening of the economy and of community generally. And there's a question again then when we look at a band of forecasts for the rest of the year and into next year, or what the recovery might look like as to whether or not we see a second wave. We have sort of counted that into our thinking around the recovery, but in a way we don't expect to see the general shutdown again. I think a number of speakers have spoken about kind of more localized shutdowns. We've seen that across Europe, places in Germany and so on, and that might be the mode of response that's taken the second time. But the big thing I think is the big uncertainty really about the recovery is what will confidence look like, and therefore what will global and domestic demand look like, and in that, in the interim period, how much will government continue to support employees and employers in terms of kind of keeping people close to market? And just some final thoughts really then, I suppose, for the council area in the last slide. Just next one. So just really when we think about recovery and try to have a conversation around that for Derry City and Strabane, I mean, one thing I suppose to ask ourselves is how much this time is really different. There was a point made in the last discussion there, the need to move at pace, but the need to balance against the bigger picture and the things that even before COVID-19 needed to be done. And I suppose I've tried to strike a balance in these thoughts on that. And if I was to draw, some thought to that, I think we are in a very different place to in previous recessions. I don't think that's to be understated. Really, in numbers of ways, the government response to this has been very, very different in terms of the fiscal stimulus and the support with the kind of furlough scheme. We're also in a very different place in terms of the depth and speed of the recession that has struck us. And I think we're also in another difference might be that some of those sectors which drove job creation in the last recovery, including tourism and retail, cannot be relied on, at least in the short term, to do that. So there may well be need for, different jobs, different kinds of solutions to be created. But I would still believe, kind of going back to the bigger picture of the strategic thinking, it's the need really, if we were to move at pace, it's the need to accelerate delivery of the plans that are in the strategical plan and indeed in the city deal. And the need, I suppose, to kind of think about those again and what resetting might need to be done in terms of how to deal with the immediate employment crisis. So, for instance, are we looking with the new people who have been added to the unemployment register, is the need there to push things like apprenticeships, training schemes, keeping people close to market, keeping people in education as longer than might sometimes be the case. Those sorts of things that might need to be done in the short term. But I think in the longer term, the need to drive on with the likes of the strategic growth plan and the city deal, I wouldn't underestimate the need to continue to do that and not be driven off course by the current crisis. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. McGuinness. Members, is there any questions on the presentation that we've just had there? I have no one listed at the moment. No. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. McGuinness. Members, item number 8 is the City Deal and Strategic Growth Projects Update Report, and I'll hand over to the Chief Executive, John Kelpie. John?
Thanks, Mayor. And I suppose I didn't have any questions for Owen, simply because maybe some of what I'm about to say might capture some of the thoughts that I had in respect of it. But obviously, Owen, thanks very much for that presentation, that analysis. It's really useful to have, and the relationship with yourselves and UUEPC is vital. If we are recording our progress economically, we need to have all of that baseline data, and we also need to have that forecasting to check to see if we're on course and to make sure that we're actually achieving the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. Some very sobering forecasts there, almost a 10% contraction in the local economy, the local GVA. Some comfort taken from the fact that usually we are at the bottom of tables we want to be at the top of, and at the top of tables we want to be at the bottom of. In terms of some of your forecasting there, it looks like we're certainly not going to be the worst impacted, but that's little comfort in the scale of what you're forecasting there. What I would say, and maybe picking up on your last comment, driving on with city deals and growth deals, and not to be driven off course. Throughout the crisis, we did try to, and many of you on the call, the Chamber of Commerce, the business community, Ulster University, Northwest Regional College, and the various government departments, we continued to meet on a regular basis, and indeed the senior politicians, not only to deal with what's in front of us right now and this current crisis, but also, as I said, actually referred to it at the start, to keep a very close eye on the strategic future, and to use the opportunity of the crisis to make sure that we continue to drive that forward. Now, I don't have a report in today in terms of city deal, and we'll bring one into the next meeting. But as many of you know, there has been quite substantial progress over the last number of months. Quick recap, all of us working together put a bid into UK government back in 2018, and last May 2019, after a huge amount of negotiation and discussion, lobbying and political influence, UK government made an announcement of a £50 million city deal and a £55 million inclusive future fund in the same announcement. So 105 million towards our strategic projects. At that time, it was assumed that the 50 million city deal would be match funded by the NICS, and it was anticipated that the future fund would also be match funded. But at that time, No one could give any guarantees in that, as the executive wasn't meeting. As you know, colleagues and members, the various partners on this call today did go ahead and work up the projects on the basis of what we thought might become available, worked up the business cases at a fairly considerable expense to each of the partners, prioritised the projects. We've brought various reports in over the months. And throughout all of this process as well, there was a continuous focus on moving the decision on the graduate entry medical school and trying to get it over the line as well. The horizon that we were all aiming toward was to get to what's known as heads of term stage, where government says, we now agree with this funding package, we agree with the strategic outline business cases that you've submitted for the various projects, and we're going to sign up to this heads of terms. And beyond heads of terms, you then move into a phase of detailed business case planning. So the plan back last May was that we would try to get to heads of terms by around about Christmas, just past. But how the world has changed in the last 6 months, and the number of issues that have that have diluted attention on these issues. We were just reflecting on them the other day. Obviously, in working with government departments, government officers, senior government officers are constantly challenged by conflicting priorities. And back in October, many senior colleagues in government were tasked with preparing for a no-deal Brexit. So that was all consuming at that point. No sooner had we come through that than many government departments were in Purda for a month and dealing with the UK elections. We got to the other side of Christmas, and most were consumed with regard to setting up the negotiations and the political discussions to get the Northern Ireland Executive back up in place, the New Decade New Approach document, an agreement that was reached. And then, obviously, since late February, early March, the whole COVID crisis has struck. So there have been an absolutely unprecedented number of major distractions and new national and international priorities that have entered into the mix. And as a result, we're still not at heads of terms. Having said that, the New Decade New Approach agreement gave us a great new opportunity. The commitments that are in New Decade New Approach, particularly in respect of the Northwest, are very welcome and were very warmly received, not just in terms of City Deal and growth funds, but also the wider priorities for the Northwest in terms of infrastructure, the growth and expansion of McGee, and other key projects. So fairly swiftly after that was signed, there has been an intense amount of lobbying to get the match funding signed off for Future Fund and City Deal. And as many of you will know, in the middle of the crisis, in early May, the Northern Ireland Executive made an announcement and a decision to sign off the totality of match funding for both City Deal and Future Fund. So we are now dealing with a confirmed funding package, not of 105 million, which was the previous amount, but of 210 million. And that is a hugely welcome step. And as I say, the delay in getting to that point has probably been beneficial in that we are now working with the totality of a funding package as opposed to maybe 3/4 of a funding package that might have been possible had the announcement come in December. The other very welcome news that happened in May was the executive's support for the graduate entry medical school being confirmed. So we're now sitting in a position where, together with project partner funding, Council, Department of Health, Ulster University, other partners, and the decision on the medical school, we are now looking at advancing planning for a confirmed total investment of over £250 million arguably the single biggest package of investment that has ever taken place in this council area. And so over the last number of months, we have been updating all of the strategic outline cases, revising the strategic outline cases, and submitting them all to government for approval. So just a quick recap on the projects and where they're at. With regard to the 50 million city deal itself, it's the innovation projects, the Carl project, the Sidra project, and the digital and smart and future city projects. Those strategic business cases have now all been commented on and passed through both the Department for Economy and the MHCLG in London. And actually the MHCLG support for a number of them was only finalised a couple of days ago. So that's a hugely big step and enables those to move immediately to heads of terms. And my thanks in particular to colleagues in Ulster University who have worked very hard to get those SOCs to that point, and to colleagues in the skills group and in the economy group of the Strategic Growth Partnership to help us with the Smart and Future City projects. The Future Fund itself is the medical school, Thrive, and a skills proposal. We've just heard yesterday that the Thrive proposal has now passed through government, and as I've said earlier, the medical school has now been given the go-ahead by the Executive Office. The City Deal match funding, 50 million initially was for the major development in Strabane Town Centre. 40 million was initially allocated to it, and 10 million towards phase 1 of the riverfront in Derry City Centre. And then now with the addition of the Inclusive Future Fund match, we're able to move ahead with phase 2 of the Derry Riverfront project, indeed combining both phase 1 and phase 2 now into one project, and to move ahead with our tourism projects both in Ebrington, which is the DNA stroke formerly known as Maritime Museum, and the other project being the Wall City Experience. So that suite of projects now all funded with the outline business cases moving through. One point to note is that Future Fund, a proposal had been made to it in terms of a £10 million skills proposal. The Northern Ireland office has subsequently advised in mid-May something which we suspected but it had not been confirmed, that Future Fund is for capital funding only, and that particular SOC is ineligible. And building on some of the points that were made earlier, skills is an absolute necessity in terms of moving forward this region and our wider strategic projects, and indeed the City Deals project. So what we intend to do from that through our skills and employment group is to look at a new business case that builds on the one that exists to date and draw in our colleagues in DFE and DFC, stakeholders across the region, including obviously Ulster and Northwest Regional, and our community skills teams to present a new case to government to both repurpose existing budgets and to find new budgets to drive forward the skills and apprenticeships agenda, which must sit in parallel with the wider City Deal projects. The ineligibility, however, of that £10 million does present us with an opportunity. And it was discussed and agreed at Derry City and Strabane District Council's meeting last Thursday, or just, Tuesday of this week, that £10 million is now reallocated to Strabane Town Centre project, bringing the total City Deal investment in Strabane Town Centre to 50 million at this moment in time. That project has never been fully funded to date, and this now enables it to move ahead in planning terms in a much more sustainable basis. And indeed, with a key component part of that project being the Northwest Regional College's proposal. There is a very strong rooted skills base to that project as well. So at this minute in time, the various SOCs, majority of them have now gone through government and have been commented on and have passed through the system. A few of them, because of the additional funding, are now being quickly revised, with projects that were previously broken into phases because of the lack of funding now being brought together as a joined up fund, and they will be submitted in the coming days. So once again, due to all of the collective efforts of everybody on this call and many others, we're at a point now where we can move immediately to heads of terms. We are lobbying government to announce heads of terms as soon as possible so that we can confidently move, as Owen has said, accelerating the development of all of this now in a post-COVID world into the preparation of OBCs, which in itself, as you all know, will take a 12 to 18 month period. But we do face these huge initial economic challenges, and we do have to focus around how we overcome these in the short term. But I would argue strongly that there are very few city regions in these islands that currently can point now to a massive injection of investment that is now guaranteed and definite. And investing in sectors such as life and health sciences, digital advanced manufacturing, and medtech, which are the sectors that are the strongest emerging from COVID, while at the same time putting in place very substantial regeneration projects that will support and hopefully nurture the sectors that are most challenged coming through COVID: retail, hospitality, and tourism, and in some way provide some strategic positive direction for those sectors to ensure that they can grow and survive during this period, and hopefully emerge from it on the other end stronger and more sustainable than they've ever been. So, Mayor, I've probably gone on maybe a little too long in terms of that update, but it is a very, very important and I think very positive moment for the city and region in spite of this big crisis that we currently face. And we in council are absolutely indebted to the many partners across this call who have worked so hard to get us to this point. We have a long, long way to go, but it's a good milestone to be at. And the next one that we need to work to very quickly is getting heads of terms announced and signed off. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that. And I'm sure everyone on this call and probably across the city and district will agree that it is very positive news. We have to be able to give our people some hope for the future as we move out of, as we hope to move out of the current crisis that we're in. So thank you for that update, and thanks to you and your team for all of your hard work, and obviously the hard work of all of our partners also to get us to this stage. I think it's encouraging and exciting as we move forward to the next stage and move on throughout the stages of this process. So thank you all. I'm just seeing comment there. Yeah, go ahead. I can't even see who that is.
Sorry, it's Paul Kavanagh. Brian, how are you?
Paul. Yes, Paul, how are you doing there? Sorry, it was the code word that I couldn't understand.
Just a quick comment, and obviously thanks to John for all the hard work that himself and his staff have been doing over the last number of years, really, on City Deal and all of these major developments. I mean, the medical school, I would not want to pass a moment of this meeting by, having banged on about it over the last year or so at various growth partnership meetings, just to say that, you know, the medical school represents a significant step change in terms of kind of health and social care in the city, and indeed everywhere outside Belfast is going to benefit from the medical school, and we're looking at other opportunities to draw on other healthcare and social care training to University of Ulster at Magee as we possibly can as well. I think the other benefits from City Deal in relation to the health and social care sector are significant as well. And certainly we've begun to see some developments both in Derry and Strabane around some of the capital developments we would like to see over the next number of years. So, you know, I really am grateful for the support from council, and I think for as well, I think it shows how this growth partnership really can, as we work together, deliver some very significant things for the future of the city and district. So I'm grateful for that, and thanks for letting me in, Mayor.
Thank you for that, Paul. Next, Gavin Colleen there. Gavin.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd just like to concur with what Paul has said and congratulate John and yourself with John and his team on the work that they've done during this period, and also the university and the Northwest Regional College. It was disappointing when the 10 million that was set aside for education and skills wasn't able to be used for this, but I congratulate John on how he's tried to look at an alternative way for using this. It's all the more reason, you know, why we are doing what we're doing to create opportunity for our young people. And COVID-19 makes this now more acute. The younger members of our population are going to be more adversely affected by this, and we need to make sure that they have the skills and the talent in order to be able to move into the workplace and these new opportunities as they move forward. So we have to ensure that that education and skills remain at the forefront and how we can improve the opportunities for all our young people within the city.
Thank you for that, Gavin. Members, there's no other listed speakers on this topic, so we will move on. Items number 9, 10 and 11, members, are really for information, and I'm suggesting with your endorsement that we take them as is read, unless anyone wants to raise any specific issue in any of those papers. But obviously they've all been sent to you in advance. So if you are agreeable to that, members, I would suggest that we move in that vein. Yeah, I'm getting no request to comment on either of those, so we'll take them as read for now. Members, item 12 is any other business. If anyone has anything that they wish to raise, please let me know. No. Okay, members, that brings our meeting to a close. I'd just like to thank all of our contributors for your questions and presentations. It has been very insightful, and we look forward to the next one. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate.